And we are live, everyone. How's it going? We're back again, wrapping up the week here with Ben. And volatility's back in the markets and things are exciting again. How's it going, Ben?
It's good. Things would be more exciting if the market didn't just dump 10% while we watched the intro of this video. But going well. I think, we're back to prices not seen since last week. That's where we're at.
Exactly. And I'll just kind of kick this off how we always do. I'll start and I'll throw on just some charts here just to put this into perspective. Here we go. So I just have the Bitcoin chart up, and this is what Ben and I are referring to here. Starting on the 6th here, we had this kind of liquidation event here, and since then we're now corrected 15% off of the local top, which we were discussing this a little bit, and this is something that's common in crypto, right? You actually even just wrote your article about how to protect yourself from market volatility, because this is something that we see all the time, to be honest.
Yeah, I think one of the things you can think about is, and this is kind of one of the points I was trying to drive home, is like you just have to know this is going to happen. And when it happens, like, it shouldn't freak you out because you already know that it's going to happen, right? And you see it to the upside and the downside, and obviously the downside is scarier than the upside, but it's almost like baked into the equation of cryptocurrency.
Exactly. And just to put it into more perspective, I follow Sam Trabucco here, who is the CEO at Alameda Research, which is a quantitative trading fund. And he sort of likes to put out these threads every time we get these liquidation notices here. So pretty much what his thread says here is this is everything within usual. All kind of the barometer, everything that typically, and just like for reference, typically when funding rates get high, this is when you start to see these moves because people are just over leveraged, and it results in an event where people necessarily don't want to sell their Bitcoin at, per se, 43, 42,000, but they have no choice because it's a cascading event of liquidations. And we see this all the time. Like this, there's similar event here. This was definitely a cascading liquidation event, and you can just see it all across the chart. And like you were saying, Ben, this isn't just to the downside, it's to the upside as well. This is how we get sort of those insane rallies and squeezes higher, but it also happens to the downside. So something like a 19% pullback isn't the end of the world on Bitcoin. And just looking at this chart, if we zoom out, like there's tons of levels where Bitcoin can still fall before it's time to start getting scared again.
Yeah, and it's like almost important to note that this happens in traditional equities markets. It just doesn't happen this frequently and to this scale, and it's probably just because of the size of the market. So, you would hope that eventually this becomes a less frequent event, but it's so easy to access credit in the crypto markets. Like, you could do it constantly. I could just go open up I could go lend something and borrow against it immediately, right? So, like, it's almost like there's excessive credit available, which just leads to this stuff, and you just know it's going to happen, and you can set up your portfolio so you're ready to buy even if you want to.
Exactly. And just to put it into reference here, Sam Trabucco, and he's really into like the quantitative aspects, but he's recognized this as well. And he says the setup's the same every time. Futures are at really high premia, so funding rate, people are paying a lot to be long. Open interest is going up. More people are taking out leverage positions. And then he has number go up. There's net buying. So typically when you get this, like, it has to be offloaded somewhere when you get this kind of a large amount of positions that are opened and lots of premia. Like, people, when it's expensive to open futures, it's not always a red flag, because we've seen times where futures are expensive and the market rips higher because people are willing to pay those premium. But a lot of the time, if you do see this sort of high premia in futures markets, it's time to look out for potentially a cascading liquidation event.
Yeah, and you know me, I stay away from leverage, and it's like it's almost like boring at this point, these events. So $3.5 billion liquidated, and I don't know how many hours it was, probably like 2 hours at a maximum.
Yeah.
And I just, I think it was 300,000 traders got liquidated in that event for $3.5 billion. It's just like, come on, man. Guess you got to go win it back in the next trade or something, right? And then you're, and the thing is, they probably open up new leverage longs, hoping they catch the bottom, and it just dumps on them even further.
So it's just, I thought it's a very interesting point to bring up that these things need to be expected in crypto markets. So a big way to avoid this is just to avoid leverage. You won't get liquidated. And if you are on leverage, this is an exact reason why you need to be risking sizable amounts of your account and not just all inning every trade, because the market will move against you. Like, we can actually get the time frame here. Let me see. In a matter of 8 hours, if you take it from the top, but from when the market actually started moving, it moved 15% in 2 hours. So this is something where people in the market are recognizing this. And if you are a new entrant, this is something where it just happens. Crypto is subject to this volatility, and you zoom out and it's really not the end of the world. Bitcoin in the past, from the bottom here, since kind of halfway through July, a little more, Bitcoin's still up 50%. So it's just zoom out. These events are usual. And people are not necessarily predicting these things, but everyone in the market should be expecting these things.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's enough here on Bitcoin. We can kind of jump over to BNB.
I will comment real quick. Someone said 20x leverages shouldn't even be available. I agree. And the irony is that they just got rid of like 100x leverage, right? That's what most of these futures exchanges just removed, like the insane leverage, but 20x is still insane.
Yeah, I think 20x is pretty excessive as well. But I mean, we're coming along here. Just last month we had nearly all exchanges offering 100x leverage. So I wouldn't be surprised to see it come down again. And I think that'll definitely help with these sort of liquidation events.
Yeah.
And on here on BNB, it's very similar story. You kind of just had BNB break down here, and you just zoom out and there's multiple levels where this can kind of potentially be caught here. Like, this could even go lower down here, and it's not the end of the world. So just very similar. BNB is an altcoin, so I wouldn't be surprised if it took an even larger correction, but very similar correction to Bitcoin. So there's not too much different here. It's kind of just the same case. I will say this is now going to provide us a local resistance. It's definitely not anything crazy, but it did get rejected from there. So that's just something to watch out on BNB. But overall, markets still look overall like strong. You zoom out and you can, even if you wanted to, you could slap some sort of trend line on here. It's not going to be perfect, but the idea here is we just got out of a massive, almost like month-long rally. So markets are looking pretty healthy.
Yeah, it's something to note, and combining this with what we were just talking about, you wouldn't have that rally if you didn't have all that leverage and credit. So it would just be a much more boring grind up than this price up 50% in 4 weeks type thing. So you take the good with the bad, right? Especially as a spot trader, you can know that this is going to happen.
Oh yeah, and part of Sam Trabuco's thread is like buying at 42,000 in that liquidation event is such a positive expected value trade, because people didn't want to be selling there. They were literally forced to. Yeah. And give me 1 second. I just need to close my blind because I'm getting absolutely blinded by this coming up.
Yeah, and someone just said Soul Top, and I don't know, local top is in, I guess, at least in the as of yesterday to today, or 2 days ago to today.
Yeah, I think the local top might be in, but I think the same person who's commenting Sol top also sold all of their Sol at like $100. So definitely the
Ah.
local top. If it's if it's the top here, I would be a little bit surprised. And this kind of just brings me into my next point. We can look at this chart, but I don't have too much to say here. This is like an absolute parabolic chart. You can try to throw some sort of trend line on here, and this looks good. Base case here is I would just call this a bull flag, and you're looking for some sort of breakout you can get on the hour. And if you want to look at this like from a purely technical perspective, I wouldn't be surprised to see this bounce somewhere. I mean, the lowest it would go is probably here, but even bounce somewhere in here, what I would be looking for is sort of this breakout of the bull flag. So you have bull flag here, come back above, so show some strength, and then go higher. But I think this looks strong, even if it holds up above like 150 here. I actually like that level a lot. So, yep, we definitely got the local top there, but I don't know. This kind of segues into the next thing. I've been liking to look at kind of all the TVL games that have been going on because we have so many layer one networks now. The local top is not in yet for TVL and Solana. It actually keeps growing. So over the last 24 hours, TVL is up 6%. It's coming up to 10 billion. And Solana looks like the strongest ecosystem as of recent, kind of in this zoomed in time frame. Just looking at TVL that's flowing in and even just price action. Polygon here is just seeing a TVL increase. It's been fairly choppy, kind of just consolidating. This looks a little bit similar to BSC, just kind of consolidating here, moving a little bit higher. Avalanche saw a massive TVL rush because of their Avalanche rush incentives, but this is still at 2 billion, much smaller than Solana. Terra looks extremely strong, but got a significant pullback today. I know Phantom also got a nice TVL spurt, but Solana has seen the most growth in the past month. It went from just in the beginning of August from 1 billion TVL to 10 billion. So this was sitting at somewhat similar levels as Avalanche and Terra. But in the sense of capital coming into the ecosystem and not leaving, there's a lot here. So I think this is a really good kind of data point to look at. And this just reminds me of BSC in kind of February and March when TVL was just rocketing. Like this is what this graph kind of shows me here. And I think at the end of the day, what's important, and then I'll let you kind of weigh in here, Ben, because I know you're going to love your capital rotation. But I think what it's true, what all that matters is we're just seeing a ton of money flowing into DeFi across the board. Because even Ethereum is back at all-time high TVLs. So just seeing that money is flowing into DeFi is, I think, what is cutting out all the noise here and one of the lead indicators to look at.
Yeah, I mean, that really sums it up, is just the inflow to DeFi in general. Like, I really don't care what chain it's going to. It's gonna, it may not even rotate chain to chain, but you know what? Like, it's also I don't know, integrated at this point. Like, so if I hold BEEFY and Auto on BSC, I am benefiting from TVL going up on Polygon, on Phantom, on Solana. So as these protocols are cross-chain anyway, I don't care where the money goes. If people want to optimize their yield, my BEEFY and Auto positions are going to do great, right? And then that in turn is going to help BNB, right? So it's becoming one of those things where this stuff is just getting intertwined, so to speak, and just money going in is money going in.
Exactly. The DeFi use case is expanding. We're seeing bridges between all these things pop up anyway. It's the nature of this is, I think all layer one networks will be composable of some sort. It just makes the most sense. Mm-hmm. And yeah, the DeFi sector as a whole is growing. There's I mean, we've touched on this countless times. It's not like a Solana versus Avalanche versus Binance Smart Chain. It's literally just the growth of DeFi. Something I touched on in the 1-year report on Binance Smart Chain was very well the explosion of DeFi, like the user base, at least the traction, may well have not happened if we didn't have these sort of side chains like Binance Smart Chain pop up, because Ethereum was already capped out and Binance Smart Chain added another 90 million wallets. Like, where would those users have went if there wasn't side chains? And then we're seeing this nature where with things like what comes straight to mind is Synapse, where these chains are trying to be composable. There's going to be multi-chain liquidity, and it should just make it like, once this money is in the DeFi ecosystem, it very well is just going to flow freely between Ethereum, Solana, Phantom, Terra, Avalanche, and Binance Smart Chain, kind of just wherever that specific capital wants to flow. And we're already starting to see sort of this differentiation in networks, like what networks are better for certain products, I think.
And I was also thinking, I don't know if it was this morning or last night, but I think we've talked about, DeFi is incredibly inefficient right now, which is why yields are so high. And, just like, it's kind of like capital inefficiency in a sense, or market inefficiency. There's just so much opportunity that you can get into. And in an efficient market, the opportunity starts to disappear. And the more layer one chains that succeed, and the more, and then there's just development just going on everywhere. I think that inefficiency, which is something I like, is inefficiency drives high yields, will just continue, right? Like, if you look at, I talked with BuyShares this week, so they're putting together index funds. So if the Bitcoin BUSD liquidity pool is getting more efficient in theory, and the yield is dropping, well, now I can hold the Bitcoin in a buy chain fund and get 35% APY. So now all of a sudden we have an inefficiency again. So, and then if you look at the ability to bridge from chain to chain, or even just holding a token that is cross bridge, is just like capturing market inefficiency and giving you high return on investment. So yeah, I think to me, the more competition, the better. The barrier to entry is so low to develop in the space. So that just drives market inefficiency and high return on investment. That's my new thesis I'm working on here.
No, and that's something that 100% is talked about in this space. Just to go back to Sam Trabucco, like, he 100% touches on the fact that there's so much opportunity in crypto because how inefficient the current state of the market is. You get these things where Elon Musk tweets out a tweet, you just got to click the buy button, be one of the first people to click it, and there's an edge in the market for that. And that's just one example of sort of the inefficiency in the market. Somewhere in a traditional market, a news event like that is going to be arbitraged out so quick. Mm-hmm. It's going to be hard for someone to sort of capitalize on that news. So that's just one example there. And there's just tons of little inefficiencies that people can capitalize on. I'd like to think this is an inefficiency. One of my latest things has been, we've been talking about Bitcoin dominance here every week, so we can jump back on that just because I think it's interesting, trying to get the pulse of how the altcoin market's going to behave in respect to Bitcoin. Let me see if I can't get this chart here. And it looks like we're trying to bottom, like we've been talking about. So here we are. We're back kind of at this historical low. Last time we saw this was at the top of the bull market in January. And just looking at the candle, we're trying to put in a wick here, kind of just put in a double bottom near the 40 range. So who knows what happens here? There's still this cluster of support, but it looks like we're trying to bounce. And we bounced here once before. So this sets up the context of my position here. But I've been kind of worrisome about this Bitcoin dominance. Are we going to get something again like in November and December of last year where Bitcoin face ripped higher while alts kind of just traded sideways? So something I found, and I've been talking about this for weeks actually, is Tranchess. And I've went ahead and I've opened up I've bought some Rook tokens, which give me 1.6x exposure to Bitcoin. And so this is just a synthetic token leverage with Bitcoin exposure. I really like this protocol. I know Three Arrows Capital has a ton of liquidity locked up in this. Not specifically sure where. Maybe it's just in stable coins because that's a pretty high yield there. But what I like about Tranchess is I can get this Rook token 1.63 like 1.5x leverage on my Bitcoin, which is a fairly reasonable amount of Bitcoin. Also, there's no liquidation here. So
I was about to ask that.
So you won't get liquidated. Your tokens can go to no value though, but you won't get liquidated. You always keep your Rook tokens. And so 1.5x leverage there. That's a very like manageable amount of leverage. I've heard people recommend anywhere from like 1 to 3x leverage is somewhat safe in a crypto bull market. And then I can go here, and this is the part I like best about it, and this is why I think it's a bit of an inefficiency. I'm being paid 11% APY to borrow Bitcoin. So I'm earning this yield in the chess token. And so I went ahead and am starting to pick up some Rook. I don't have that much, but this is something where hopefully I want to start rotating some of my altcoin exposure into something like this. I think it's great. I'm being paid to borrow what I've deemed in my risk management profile a safe amount of Bitcoin at 10% APY. So this is something that I think is pretty unique here and kind of goes along with what I've been wary of with this Bitcoin dominance or Bitcoin run. So I think this is an interesting move here.
Yeah. The only thing I would point on that Bitcoin dominance chart is there's one other way that Bitcoin dominance continues to go up, and it's that Bitcoin drops, but all coins drop more. Yeah. So that is one thing that could happen. I don't think that will happen. But your point on Tranchess is just another example of how easy it is to get credit in this market.
Exactly.
It's like scarily easy to. So I think those liquidations, maybe these events are good because it keeps the market just healthier. Like some of that credit needs to be repaid, right?
Definitely.
And in the case of September 7th, it was $3.5 billion worth of credit that needed to be repaid.
Yeah. And then I think one thing that can be interesting here to touch on that probably is not going to be the likes of many, but I mean, it's there. We might as well talk about it. Let's see. We did get this sort of complacency bounce here in 2018.
We're not in a 2018 market.
But no, this looks like it's going to go up only.
Like a dead cat bounce or whatever happening here.
Yeah, let's just send this swiftly to 100,000. But I think it is important to note that this market will get extremely crazy. Obviously, I'm sitting here with the pros of the bull market is still on, but we won't see actual mania till Bitcoin kind of gets back over these all-time highs. That's when it's going to be max risk on again. And it might be something, it might be something where, dude, I choked. I don't know if you heard, I choked on some water earlier. Like I was trying to find my mouse while I was choking. So that was probably the after effects of that.
This live stream's too early for you.
Something like that. But I think it'll be like the market hasn't even gotten interesting again. It might be something where we break all-time highs, all the spotlights on Bitcoin for a few weeks, but we haven't really seen the risk on again. Like once Bitcoin's back over all-time highs, cool, it's had its run over. That's when we're going to see a sort of massive move on altcoins if we can get back over these all-time highs.
Yeah, and it'll happen. You know, it might just take a little bit of time, but I think someone to pay attention to is Plan B. I'm still a stock to flow believer, and he was calling this month could end around 43,000. You know, he put out this like monthly minimum Bitcoin price,
Gotcha.
and I think it's like 43,000 for September, but then like 67,000 for October. Because what we know about Bitcoin is once it starts moving and it makes that move, it's going to be fast, right? It'll be a couple weeks and we're like into price discovery.
Definitely. And then it's just all eyes on Bitcoin until it decides to slow down and people rotate their gains out. But I definitely think I mean, people I follow in the space, Kyle Davies, even Kyle Davies Suzu at Three Arrows Capital, and then even just large influencers, Crypto Dog just comes straight to my head. They are also looking at this Bitcoin dominance and just the sentiment on Bitcoin. I saw a poll the other day from the Crypto Dog, and it was something like 30% of people don't have Bitcoin or only 30% of people have like Bitcoin exposure currently, which is just like seeing dominance at all-time lows, kind of Bitcoin holdings at lows. I mean, this is going to move at some point. Bitcoin, I mean, even all this entire bull market, Bitcoin has kind of led the rally. Bitcoin will do the hard work, get a nice breakout, and then we'll see these immense flows of capital into these smaller markets. And that's when you start getting these 1,000% moves.
Yeah. And I think, this week we officially have a country building a balance sheet of Bitcoin. We've got, with every new like breakthrough, it's always, one company bought Bitcoin and now there's a bunch of companies. And it's like, okay, so now we have a country buying Bitcoin. And I would kind of imagine that that's going to be followed over. Obviously, it's going to move slow, right? There will be a slow period. But, next 6 months, I think you're going to see fireworks from Bitcoin in particular. Yeah, it's becoming a balance sheet asset. It just is.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And this was something even closer down to 30K. Like there hasn't been so much of a fundamental shift. Like we got through a very bearish sort of exchange and regulation news, the mining kind of ban and all of that. And that was a big sort of bearish catalyst. And look where we're at now. And there hasn't been any sort of major sentiment shift. Like everything that's bullish, like every day you wake up and it's like, oh, wow, Visa bought a CryptoPunk. El Salvador now has Bitcoin. So it's just like these sort of things. Ukraine legalized Bitcoin. Not exactly sure what that means, but you're seeing this thing where countries are starting to pay attention to this. So I think it's important.
Yeah, like we did have the Coinbase news where the SEC is, the guy, what is his name? Armstrong was basically tweeting that the SEC is saying, we're going to sue you if you launch this EARN program.
Yeah, that definitely wasn't the most bullish thing there. And I think part of that can be attributed to this downside move if you want to link news to it. But yeah, I actually saw somewhere, I know Mark Cuban replied somewhere, and it's just, yeah, exactly. So he's saying SEC is taking a stance of regulation via litigation. And Mark Cuban is just pretty much saying, like, take the offensive, like take them on this, and it's just going to have to be what it is what it sounds like. But this is also something where crypto in the US is getting increased awareness. Like we just had the whole kind of debacle with the infrastructure bill, and that necessarily didn't go bad for crypto. It didn't have the best outcome. But I believe that's still kind of being sorted out there. We didn't get a bad outcome, which is important. So I think the one thing too is regulation moves really slow. So as people are starting to recognize that, okay, we need to be spending money on kind of making sure we're working with regulators and bridging this gap, I think it's only going to get better. I think a lot of people are making a lot of noise saying to the US, saying like, this is a lot of innovation we're giving up if we want to go down this route. So I think just the crypto space as a whole is going to start paying more attention to it, and will make a lot of noise. So don't think this is ultimately bearish. I mean, I don't think the US wants to lose the innovation either. Like there's a lot going on here.
Yeah, I think and obviously I'm not a legal expert by any stretch of the imagination. It sounds to me like the SEC is just making like almost like a land grab. It's like right now US regulators are like wrestling over who's in charge, right? You have the US Treasury was getting involved with the bill portion of it. And I personally don't understand how USDC meets any requirement of being a security, right? But the SEC is trying to get involved there. I don't think the SEC is regulating our savings accounts. Like I know they're not. So like I don't get how a 4% APY on a coin that is not a security has anything to do with the SEC. And that may be what Coinbase proves in court is like, we have to go comply with somebody else. I don't know what, why are you here type conversation. But, it's the SEC is going to try. I think they want to be involved everywhere.
Yeah. And I don't think it's the end of the world. I'm also far from a legal expert, but it sounds like regulation by litigation. It's not something where this is just happening in crypto. Like it's kind of just what happens. So we got to put resources towards it. And I mean, yeah, there's very good arguments for sort of why this isn't a security and why it is. And it's just going to have to, sounds like it'll just be a long and slow process of figuring it out through litigation. It
will. And I think something, at least for this bull run, is none of this is going to be figured out, I would imagine, in this bull run. So yeah, prices can go up.
That was going to be my next point. I think long and slow isn't a bad thing because the space is going to continue to rapidly expand, and the slower they go, like it's just going to push off. If there were to be any bearish catalyst, it's just going to set it out at a further date while
it will,
and then continues to innovate.
And honestly, the U.S. is going to give other countries the ability to become a better place for innovation, which ultimately, I want to see that happen, right? I would love to see the US lead it, but if they don't want to, I want to see someone else lead it.
Exactly. And it'll happen. So yeah, I mean, you're seeing it in Singapore. That's the first example that comes to my mind. There's tons of crypto kind of going on in Singapore, and it's because of the stance that they have currently towards it. So there very well could be, that's the other thing. Like if this doesn't go favorably in the US, there's other places where crypto regulation is very favorable. There's just going to be an exodus of crypto companies from the US, but it'll still happen elsewhere. Like this is a global industry.
Mm-hmm. I like it. Coin go up.
Yeah. So just to wrap things up here, Bitcoin dominance, I'm still looking at that. This liquidation event, it wasn't anything out of the blue. We've seen this all bull market. And what I typically like to say is a 30% pullback on Bitcoin should be expected, to be expected. You never know if you're going to get a bearish catalyst and get a massive kind of cascading liquidation notice. You can see here in the chart, people didn't want to sell at 43,000, but people were forced to. So that's just the nature of these events. And if you're on leverage, that's really important. If you're in spot, it's not the end of the world. You just need to know that it'll happen. And if your kind of macro outlook is bullish, then there's no need to sell these 10, 20% dips. And so the other main thing that I'm also just paying attention to is, while I am paying attention to Bitcoin dominance and just what's going to happen with altcoins, are they going to freeze up while Bitcoin runs? We're seeing record amounts of money flow into DeFi. Almost 160 billion, 150 on Ethereum. Solana added 8 billion of TVL in about a month. Phantom, a couple million in TVL. Terra added 4 or 5 billion in TVL. Avalanche as well. And then Binance Smart Chain hasn't added too much, but it's still sitting at 16 billion, the second largest DeFi network. So we're seeing capital flows into DeFi. So I think overall, there's just like a lot of the bearish narrative has been dispelled, and there's been no sort of fundamental shift. Like with it, it's still up only season across a lot of consensus.
Agreed.
All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap this one up here. Hopefully, I mean, local tops in on Solana, that's something I'm paying a lot of attention to, but I'm ready to start seeing this capital flow into Binance Smart Chain. It was a little bit bloody, but hopefully a little bit bloody this week, but hopefully next week we see some more. For anyone who's tuned in or is watching the replay, please go ahead and like and subscribe on the video. Definitely subscribe. We're doing these market recap streams once a week, and we kind of just go over all of what's happening in crypto, DeFi, and specifically Binance Smart Chain. So there's tons of information here. Just to wrap this up, Justin Katz has a question if Venus is a ghost app. They're not a ghost app. We actually did a live stream with them that you can check out here on the YouTube. They're lending and borrowing. They did have some issues with their team. So originally, a large portion of their team was Swipe, the I think it's
SXP.
Yeah, there we go. And their team actually withdrew from Venus, and Venus also had a really bad liquidation event through their money market, which has kind of hurt them as well. But since then, they've been rebuilding. They have like a much larger onus on making sure collateral factors are okay. It was kind of just like over risked on the XVS token, and so people were able to borrow too much, and the market got manipulated. But now there is a actual team, and the Binance Smart Chain team is working with Venus. Just to answer your question there, Justin. And again, thank you everyone for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll be live again same time next week.
Awesome. Thanks, Greg.
Yep. Peace out. If I can find my mouse here and throw up this outro.